The next study by the same author 7 years later, work volume and strength training. So this was to verify, the objective was to verify the link between core temperature and muscle fatigue, and tested palm cooling during rest between sets enhanced strength, volume, and gains. So they built off their earlier study. They had young adult subjects perform high intensity exercise in the heat to elevate core temperature. So note that they began by elevating core temperature to about 39 Celsius. That is modest hyperthermia. And then they did bench press to failure. So the participants were in a state of heat stress. Now, if we go back to earlier in module 6, we found that in a systematic review, 88% of studies found hyperthermia, some levels, in sport and exercise. It is very common, but you have to get to this point for palm cooling to have efficacy. The variables were with or without palm cooling during rests. And then in follow-up interventions, participants trained over weeks with bench press or pull-ups twice weekly, and then performance was tracked over time. The key findings: about 0.6 degrees Celsius lower core temp, very consistent with their earlier findings. That is significant. Increased bench press volume for cooled versus not cooled. So they had increased volume of reps. They had lower core temperature. And training volume over a period of time dramatically improved. So over 3 weeks of bench press, volume rose 40% with cooling versus 13% in the control. Huge difference. Over 6 weeks of pull-up, this is a crazy number. Volume skyrocketed 144% versus 5% in experienced trainees. Very, very interesting. Now, even novices saw greater gains, 80% versus 20%. Regarding strength, doing bench press 1 rep max over the period of time, 1 rep max increased 22% versus very little change in the no cooling phase. So enormous increases, and not just acute in that single workout, but progressive overload by doing more volume in each workout and sustaining it over a period of consecutive weeks, seen very, very large increases. So much so that they came up with the phrase better than steroids, and this was the chart that they posted. So they found with 10 weeks of bench press training, doing the exact same protocol, with 6 of those weeks using palm cooling, they found a 22% increase in 1 rep max. They compared it to another published study that looked at strength increases 1 rep max using anabolic steroids. And this is where the comparison to palm cooling versus steroids came from. It was this 2012 study. Core temperature, here is palm cooling in black. You see it is attenuated throughout the top and it recovers faster. So during the treadmill exercise, core temperature did not get as high. We're talking, I believe this was 0.6 degrees Celsius lower, and then it drops down, recovers faster. So significant difference in core temperature. That's followed up by work volume after. Again, a significant difference in being able to do more reps in that fatigued state. So the conclusions of the authors are that cooling the palms between sets can delay fatigue onset, linked to elevated core temperature, and that's important, and substantially improve work volume in resistance exercise. So they suggest palm cooling as a novel strategy to enhance training adaptations by mitigating thermally induced fatigue.